Okay,
Perfect.
now we're ready.
See, you got that artistic thing too, right?
A little bit.
That is awesome. So this is Nate House. You're watching Craft House Media, and I'm here with Mina, and I just said your name wrong, so now I've
That's
rehearsed
okay.
Charapu.
Charapu.
Okay, Mina Charapu. And why I wanted to meet with you is, first of all, I see these really great images show up on your Instagram feed, and you're always doing something interesting. But also, sometimes I feel like adulting is hard.
Yes, it
and,
is.
and I don't always like, I feel like I semi get it together. I've got like this aspect of my life going or this thing going, but rarely do I feel like I meet someone that all their, and I don't want to put you on such a high
Oh,
platform
sure.
to like, oh, this, you've got it all figured out, you know. And then you're like, no, I don't. But I feel like you have so many things set in motion that I think we could all learn from you a little bit.
Oh, that's so kind. Thank you.
Maybe if you can introduce for me just what is it that you do,
Okay.
and we'll start there.
My name is Mina Charapu, and I am a board certified psychiatrist, and currently I am working at Washington University in St. Louis. I take care of inpatients that are people that are in crisis, adults 18 and older. And I also do civil forensics, meaning workman's comp,
Okay.
as opposed to criminal forensics, which I do not do. I also was recently appointed a commissioner for the Missouri Board of Mental Health by Governor Parson.
And you said that's a new thing.
That's a new thing.
Okay.
I'm also, are we just career right now?
Sure.
Because,
Tell me about your career.
okay.
What do you do? Who are you, Mina?
So I did my medical school in Philadelphia at Drexel School of Medicine. And during my medical school, I had the bounty of meeting my husband, and his name is Manu Mofidi. And I met him at my sister's house in Denver when I was visiting her. My sister is 6 years older than me. I'm the fourth child of four, the baby of the family. And my sister Martha was in Denver, and we were having a Baha'i get together at her house. And my future husband walked in the door, and when he saw me, he decided that he was supposed to marry me.
Wow. If only all of us could figure these things out so quickly.
Yes, it was very fast. And so I can go into the story of that a little
Sure.
bit later
Okay.
if you want.
We'll
Yeah,
segment back.
we'll sort of, but basically, by the time I went back to medical school, I was married.
Wow.
And my husband already had a job lined up in St. Louis. Being from Pennsylvania and being over on the East Coast, I never thought of looking to the Midwest for my residency or for a place to live. When Manu told me that he had a job in St. Louis at a law firm already, I thought, well, let me look and see what residency programs are available. After reading up on Washington University in St. Louis, I realized that they had such an excellent psychiatry residency program, and that I really should have applied regardless of whether I had met somebody who was going to be in St. Louis or not. When I applied, I had the bounty of getting accepted and finished my residency here. And then my husband and I stayed in St. Louis, and we now have 3 children that are still under our roof. We have a 17-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 10-year-old. And we are St. Louisans at this point.
That's right.
Go Blues.
Everyone says go Blues these years.
Exactly.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
So you've enjoyed mental health.
Mm-hmm.
You've enjoyed psychiatry. You also mentioned you started a family,
Mm-hmm.
and it is really hard to live a balanced life.
Mm-hmm. So I have actually been asked this question a lot. I am not purposefully leading a balanced life.
Okay.
I think my approach to a lot of things just happens to be balanced. It is natural, so it's hard because I don't realize I'm doing things until people start pointing it out.
Okay.
And then I have to think about it. But I have, and maybe this is being the baby of a large family, I have learned to be able to go along with things and have fun,
Okay.
no matter what it is. I don't remember as a kid getting hung up on the details. I don't remember being upset or holding on to negative emotions that we went to Burger King instead of McDonald's. I just remember thinking, oh, okay, we're going to Burger King. I mean, I know that sounds like a silly example, but I'm just trying to think of an example that would have come up as a kid where I may have held on to an idea that I wanted to do, and being in a big family, probably not getting to do a lot of the things that I wanted to do,
Sure.
and just learning to not only go along with it, but have a really good time.
So make the best of the opportunities that are given to you.
Make the best of the opportunities that are given to me. And I think that was a habit that I accidentally, just again by family circumstances, a habit that I accidentally practiced
Okay.
to where it became how I approached everything. So, for example, I would set goals. My family is very goal oriented, so it was never hard for me to come up with goals to set. I would work really hard at them, but if it didn't pan out, I don't recall being so upset about it, because what I started to learn, and this was with my father's encouragement and my mother's, they're both very similar in that there is a trust that when you work hard at something and when you put your mind to something and it doesn't happen the way you think it should have, there is usually something even more wonderful that is in store for you. And again, this isn't something that I consciously thought of growing up. It was an attitude that my parents had that seeped into how we would process things that were happening. Does that make sense?
No, I love that. It sounds like you make an effort,
You give it your all.
give it your all.
You don't worry, and then you learn to not worry about the end product, because even if you think you're supposed to get something based on the work you did, if you waste your time being upset or disappointed, you might actually miss the wonderful thing that was in store for you. Oops. Come here, Ludo.
Watch your cord. You're spinning.
Did I spin?
Spin.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, sorry. Ludo barks at leaves falling, so if we want him to not bark, I need to hold him.
Perfect. I love this idea though of finding confirmations, and I love dogs. So by giving it your all, letting go, and then allowing what's best to happen.
Yes, and for example, I was very quick with my story about medical school in the beginning, but the full story is that when I went into medical school, it was for the purpose of being an OB-GYN doctor or a surgeon. At some point in my, wait, just one second. So the whole story of medical school is that I went into medical school to be an OB-GYN doctor or a surgeon. At some point in medical school, I lost my way, if we want to use that phrase, in that I all of a sudden felt goalless.
Okay.
I wasn't sure 100% what I wanted to do anymore. And because it wasn't surgery or OB-GYN, it felt like I was lost, which looking back, of course, now 22, 23 years later is silly, because the fields are vast. You can do anything. You can even do medical school and go into administration, never see a patient if you don't, but you don't have that understanding when you're 22, 23, 24 years old. And I don't even know if anyone told me that, but if they did tell me that, I didn't hear it.
Right.
Even. So it was at that point that my sister said, Mina, don't even worry about this. Just come and visit me for a month, 2 months, 6 months, whatever you need in Denver, and you will figure it out. And that felt really true to me. So I called my parents and said, I am taking a leave from medical school because something's not right. And even though they were worried about me, I had already made up my decision. I didn't call them to consult about it. I called them to tell them. And I adore my sister. I love her. So I knew I was going to a safe place. Like something good was going to happen. And if not good, at least fun.
Which is even better than good sometimes.
Which is even better than good.
Love it.
And lo and behold, 2 weeks after I moved in with my sister, I had decided I was going to take 6 months off of medical school because I was in my 3rd year. And the way that it was working is it had to either be 3 months or 6 months. So I just decided, let me take the 6 months. And 2 weeks after I moved in with my sister, she had this Baha'i get-together at her home. And I was not in a position where I was looking to get married or be in a relationship or anything of that sort. So when my husband said that he saw me and thought, oh, that's her, I'm supposed to marry her, and apparently sat down next to me and we had conversations, which I don't have much of a recollection of. And then later on that night, we all went out as a big group to a coffee house where, again, we had more conversations that were very significant to him. A week later, he asked me to marry him.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
And I said, ding, this is it.
Okay.
That's what all of this unrest or whatever it was that I was feeling was all about. And I just had that trust. That's just my own personal trust, you know. It's nothing you can really prove to people. But when you see how things lined up, you just come to that understanding that you made the right choices. And again, one of the things growing up is my parents, just based on their attitude, really didn't dwell on the choices they made. They were very good at making a decision and moving on, not ruminating, not beating themselves up about their decisions or choices, because I think they really made their decisions with pure intentions, whatever their pure intention was, that it didn't occur to them to second guess or double guess or worry about it. And it's not like we grew up with them telling us these things. It was just an attitude that we grew up with. So I didn't regret my decision at all to leave medical school. And immediately I found a job. And then 2 weeks later, here comes this man who says, I'm supposed to marry you. So I'm like, check, check, check. Everything was so easy at that point, confirming that I had made a good decision. And so we ended up, after going through a process, we were married 3 months later. So I met him in February and we were married in May. And now we've been married 20 years this May.
That's exciting.
It is very exciting. And what I understood when I met my husband, because obviously I didn't know him very well. However, when I was getting married, I was looking for someone that I could live with under the same roof for 60 years.
Okay.
That is a very different question than do you have the butterflies in your stomach? And does the person make you feel X, Y, or Z? I wasn't really interested in that. What I was interested in was marrying someone who I thought was handsome. I do think you have to have that chemical, that physical attraction, but somebody that I could live under the same roof with for 60 years, because I knew I was going to be busy and I needed someone that when I said, I would like to do X, their next sentence was going to be, how can I help you do X? And same for me. I wanted to be with someone who, as soon as they said, oh, I would love to do such and such, my response would be, how can I help you do that? And any success that I think people see with me is truly the success and the luck of finding someone who is willing to grow with me under the same roof for 60 years and have that attitude of, what can I do to help you get to where you need to go? One of the things I told my husband when he asked me to marry him, I said, listen, what I have noticed about people around me is the things that are exciting to them about someone end up being the things that I hear them complaining about. For example, I would hear my friends say, oh, I just love how my significant other is so spontaneous and just loves to surprise me. 6 or 8 months later, this same thing that they were head over heels about would be, I am so sick and tired of my significant other not being responsible, not following through, and again, to me, it was really I came to understand that this was actually the flip side of the same coin. And so I asked my husband to be, at the time, what do you think you like about me? Because you don't know me. He said, well, I love how you're just so fun and spontaneous. So I said, okay, what is the flip side of that? And he had to think. And he said, well, and I said, well, it might mean that things don't get put away, or there might be dishes in the sink that I don't see that you see, or whatever it is. In other words, the flip side of being fun and spontaneous might actually really be annoying and might be a deal breaker.
Be a little reckless.
Be a little reckless. You know, you're supposed to bring your checkbook. Did you bring it? No, I thought you brought it. I mean, it might mean something else too that can really get on your nerves. And when he thought about that, he said, you know what, that's fair enough. And same with him. One of the things I really liked about him in the short time that I knew him is he's very organized. Manu is so organized and has everything lined up, all the ducks lined up, T's crossed, I's dotted. That's really wonderful, but what's the flip side of that?
Well.
Possibly could be inflexible, could be judgmental, and could become abusive in that sense. Why am I always the one who's organizing and you're never? I mean, you can hear the arguments already once the butterflies and the excitement dies down. So one of the things I told him is, let's try to work hard to recognize what the flip side is, the reality is of the things right now we think we like about each other, and agree to have humor about it and not abuse each other about it. So for example, if you love my spontaneous and fun side and we're going on the family trip and I forgot to actually book the hotel, that's funny. Like, let's laugh about that. And then we'll have that memory of, remember that time mom forgot to book the hotel and we had to stay in some, lodge that we didn't know was in the... There is a fun and funny side to that. Or you can abuse me saying you're sick and tired of me not doing whatever it was I promised to do and not following. So which way do we want to live together under the same roof?
Right.
And I had these conversations with him before we got married.
In a very short time.
In a very short time, because I knew that these were the conversations I wanted to have with someone who was going to marry me.
Yeah.
And I had just filed these over the years, just hearing other people's experiences, seeing what worked, what didn't work. And I also made the assumption that the things I see in other couples and that they probably see in me too. So if I am seeing that, why is my friend with this guy? He's not nice to her. That should make me stop and say, is it possible that I've also been with someone who wasn't nice to me and my friends tried to warn me and I ignored them?
Because what we see is what we've experienced.
What we've experienced. And so I also, at that point, before I met my husband, had developed a habit of trusting my friends rather than arguing with them that, oh, you don't know this person. Oh, we're so much better when we're alone than when we're... That never works out. I've never seen a relationship like that work out. And if they're kind enough as friends to see those red flags, I decided to honor that. And so I was able to stay out of a lot of trouble until I met my husband.
So by consulting people you trust, you had a better experience finding a good path.
I had a better experience finding a good path, or if they spontaneously came to me and said, Mina, you're not happy, or this doesn't feel right or look right, to pause and think about what they're saying. Because the assumption is they care about me and they're probably seeing something that I couldn't see at that moment.
What you're really telling us is that having a solid relationship, having this foundation, is really what allowed you to build the happy life that you have.
It has, because I was able to set my relationship up such that my energy is spent doing the things that I love for the people I love, rather than arguing or feeling unappreciated, or, rather than my energy leaking to those other emotions. So I'm able to work full time, go pick my kids up from school, go home, cook dinner, and do whatever needs to be done. Because when I come home after driving my kids around here and there, and my husband has come home from work, he's doing the dishes. He's doing the laundry.
Everyone's contributing.
It's our house. Yeah. It's our children, and it's our success. Yeah. One of the other things that I had talked to my husband about is, and I know this sounds unromantic, but it actually leads itself to have time and energy for romance, and for me anyway, is I said, getting married is really a business. It sounds boring, but if you think about it, there's the financial arm. Mm-hmm. You are diversifying your investments. You have to make business plans. What are we going to do in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? If you have children, you have to have a roadmap for how you would like to raise those children together. Right. There is nothing about marriage that isn't like a business. Right. And once you have that business partner that you can trust and that you are on each other's side to help that business flourish, you can relax and actually enjoy your business. Right. And then the romance is fun. You are learning so much I learned so much about my husband every day, because I only knew him for a few months. So even just recently, it's like, you did that? I didn't know that, And I just love learning more and more about him. And again, it's not to say that things don't get tough, but we have developed a roadmap of how to make things tough and fruitful. One of the things I noticed growing up with people around me, either friends or family, when it would come to arguing, is that somebody would have a complaint. Okay. And the immediate reaction of the person that they were complaining to was to prove to that person how they were wrong, how were misunderstanding everything around them. And we call that gaslighting. I didn't know that's what it was called when I was a kid.
Okay.
But it's basically gaslighting, where you, instead of hearing what the person is saying, you're telling them how they're wrong and how their perception is wrong. Before my husband and I were married, I said, I want us to try a certain way of discussing things that will help us, I think. Let's just try it. Might not work, but that will help us get through any difficulties we might have. And that is to assume that when somebody has a complaint, start from the assumption that the complaint is correct. Let's believe that it was true. So, for example, let's see. Let me think of a generic argument. When people say, you're taking me for granted, that is something that I think people really feel, and people really struggle with. Before we got married, my husband and I agreed that for either of us to go to each other with a complaint, we already have to give that person the space that they had actually the courage to say something. So recognizing that the person had courage to actually come and say whatever it is they're going to say. Also, number 2, understanding that sometimes when we're emotional, we are not going to say things in the right way. And to not immediately start to argue about, well, I didn't like how you approached me. I didn't like the way you said that, because that muddies the waters of what the actual issue is. Now, it might be true that the person said it in maybe a way that wasn't nice, but that's something that we agreed we would table for another day to talk about. Because we have to assume when you're emotional, you're not going to know how to bring things up. And when you're complaining about someone, have you ever been able to bring up that complaint in a way that that person says, you're right, I do that? No matter how sweetly you bring it up, how kindly you bring it up, no one ever, it's never the right way, because you're complaining about someone and that hurts.
Right.
So we already had those things. You're not allowed to argue about how the person approached you. You are supposed to recognize that whatever it is the person is bringing took courage.
Yes.
And we have to start the talk assuming that the person is right. The person might not be correct, but start the attitude of the conversation with, you know what? You're right. I do take you for granted. When did you feel that? And what could I have done differently at that moment for you not to feel taken for granted? By the end of the conversation, what I have found with Manu is what the original thing was that was bothering the person wasn't what the original thing was.
Interesting.
It was something completely different. And if you give each other that space to come to that realization, what could I have done differently that you didn't feel taken for granted? Well, maybe you could have done this. Okay, can I do that next time? The other agreement to this method of, I guess, arguing, if you want to call it, or talking, is that if the person agrees to put effort into making a change, you are not allowed to judge what that change looks like. For example, my husband loves to do the dishes, and I like to do the dishes, but I have to be honest with you, I will do all the dishes but 1 or 2. I don't know why, but I always leave 1 or 2 dishes in the sink. And
just a placeholder, to keep
I
the
guess,
sink warm.
there'd always be a knife, or I don't know, I just could never 100% be done. Whereas my husband is 100% done. And here's an argument. So early in our marriage, he got upset that I don't do the dishes.
Okay.
And that I don't complete the dishes. But how he came to me was, you don't do the dishes. Now that wasn't true, because I do the dishes, I just don't complete them.
Right, you do 98% of the
I do
dishes.
98%, but I didn't start the argument with, yes, I do the dishes. I just did them last night. You don't see, instead of starting the argument like that, I said, tell me why you don't think I do the dishes. By the time we were done talking through it, what he really needed was to know that I would try to pay more attention. After that, I still don't do the dishes. I don't complete them, but he has come to understand that that is actually my effort in trying to complete them. And now when he goes to the sink and sees a dish, he laughs. It is humorful for him to see a dish or two in the sink.
Because it's not that you're showing that I don't care about you or I disrespect you or I'm trying to tread on
Right.
this feeling of
Or trying to be passive aggressive by not doing it. I actually agreed with him that yes, he was correct in his feeling that I'm not helpful, but I also let him know that that wasn't my intention.
Sure.
And that I promised to do what I could to help him not feel that way, but he also could not decide what that looks like.
I think it's funny to imagine, you just told me how you're on this now, the Missouri Board of Psychiatrists, Psychiatry.
Missouri Board of Mental Health.
Missouri Board of Mental Health.
Yeah.
Your husband is very much an established
Yeah.
lawyer. And still, it's dishes.
It's dishes. And when
Doesn't
you're
matter who you
married,
are.
it doesn't matter who you are. It's going to be toothpaste, dishes, lights. I mean, it's going to be those things.
Yeah. Funny. Yeah, it's how we manage ourselves, how we get along.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's like you've built this successful life
Mm-hmm.
on a successful relationship.
On a successful relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like that you said it looks like a business. In my mind, it was always it looks like a nonprofit. But a business sounds like, man, these folks got it. You know, it's moving forward. Like it's not just.
Exactly.
I have to change my mindset. Yeah.
I knew that if I were in a trusting relationship with someone who I did find physically attractive, because I do think you do need that, and that if we were both on that path together, that love would come. And I came to this realization, this is going to be very silly, I came from an era when we used to listen to tapes and then CDs. And I remember when I was a teenager listening to a CD that I listened to it over and over again and get sick of it and would not ever want to hear it again. And then there were CDs that I would maybe get as a gift from someone, and I would put it on in the background. Wasn't so crazy about it, but would put it on repeat, and all of a sudden, it would become my favorite CD that I could listen to forever and never get sick of it. I was like, that's going to be my marriage. I need to find that person where it's, it's fine. But then the more I'm around them, the more and more I fall in love, and the more and more I like it, and I just knew that that's what it was going to be like.
Boy, I didn't know that we were doing a Valentine's Day piece here, but this has really been a great reminder of how that type of relationship is what can really move you forward. That's really cool.
It does, because anything that I'm not doing is because I'm not doing it. Anything I want to do, I can do because Manu will never get in my way. I will never get in his way. Yeah. And I know that I can count on him to help me figure out how to do it.
Thank you so much. And is there anything else that you wanted to share before I wrap this up?
There are some basic things that I think are really important. For example, I think everyone should be physically active.
Yes.
I know that sounds so basic, and you can even maybe say superficial, but I think it is important. And I think it means something to be physically active. And that was another thing before Manu and I got married, that we promised each other that we would be physically active the rest of our life, and that we would help each other to be physically active. I remember many times I would come home post-call and Manu would say, honey, I know you're so tired, but just go out for a walk for 20 minutes. And I would, I'll take care of the laundry. I'll do everything. We'll eat out tonight. We'll do whatever. Go out and just do something. And he was right. And I would end up being out for an hour and a half. And my walk, my trudge, would turn into a run. But helping each other. There was a time in Manu's career when he was waking up at 4:30 in the morning because he wanted to teach at WashU and he was a full-time lawyer. So I said, what do we need to do to help you do both? Because you love both. But also he wanted to be physically active. So I would just, if I came home post-call, but he hadn't been physically active, I would say, you go, I'll take care of the house. And we would just do those things for each other because being physically active is something I'd recognized early on that was important.
I think that gets missed too. I don't think we get a good guidepost necessarily on how to eat, how to stay physically active,
Right.
how to get adequate sleep, how to, manage stress. None of these things are really, we either don't have good examples,
Right.
or we don't see around us a society that's supporting each other to do that.
Right.
And it gets lost.
It does get lost. And one thing I'd like to remind people is we might not have the fortune to grow up with good examples of these things, but by seeing the negative, you can extrapolate the positive.
The bad example is what teaches you what not to be.
Right.
Yeah.
And I did that a lot in my life too. I was able to take things that were negative and say, that didn't feel good. So what would be the 100% opposite of that? And let me do that. So don't feel hamstringed by your examples. Oh, well, I didn't learn that. My parents didn't teach me that. They actually did. By not doing what you think you needed, you can do the opposite and get that.
I think so many times people get caught up in the emotions of how things are that they don't pay attention to the reality of how things are. So I love your steps on how to argue.
Yeah.
That's great.
Gets you to the point where you end up not arguing anymore because you just have so much trust that nothing is an argument. And you just laugh about things. Yeah. When my husband and I go somewhere and the person across the desk is asking us for information and he reaches down and brings out his accordion binder or whatever, that I laugh. It's funny that he is so organized that he has everything in those files. But you can't abuse each other for those things. Those are his strengths and I love him for that. But I can't turn around and get angry that he's inflexible or this or that. That's not fair. And so I laugh about it. And that's another thing that I think is important, is knowing when you have found the person that you want to be under the same roof with, that regardless that your lives are together, there is still some aspects of your lives that are just none of each other's business. For example, the fact that my husband is so organized, it is none of my business that he is organized. I can't interfere with that. And again, it just goes back to the flip side of the coin. It's just another way of saying that you can be who you are, but don't let it bleed into who you think I should be.
Okay.
Your organization and your level of how you like to do things is your business.
But don't remake me into who you are.
Right. And so once you learn that there are certain things that are your business and not your business, then it helps you just have a lighter attitude about it too, I think.
Well, Mina, thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
This was a great interview. I didn't realize I was going to have a Valentine's Day interview here, but
I was going to say, if you ever want to talk to me about my actual work,
it is work. It's a lot of work,
I'll talk to you about that.
And I wonder about that too. Like, if they'll discover the happy gene, because honest to God, I feel like me and my brother are just very happy people.
Yeah. It's like nothing bothers you.
during my year of service, I had a friend that would tease me, and she nicknamed me Happy House. Like that
That's
was,
funny.
yeah. Like it's just like you don't have to be upset about anything.
No,
And,
it's such a wasted emotion.
yeah, wasted time.
Yeah. And when you're unhappy about things, most of the time it's because you've assumed what someone else's intention was.
Right, you've taken on a mind reading role. You've taken on this.
You've put meaning into something they've done
Yeah,
or said, and you're holding it to them, and that's not fair.
right. I had a friend who, no matter what was said, what was done, always tried to give people the best possible interpretation of what they said or did.
Absolutely.
But it was unbelievable to the level that they were able to do that all the
Mm-hmm.
time.
That was another thing me and Manu talked about. Well, I talked to him about before we got married is benefit of the doubt.
The benefit of the doubt.
So you have to give each other the benefit, like, oh, I'm so mad that Mina never does dishes. But let me give her the benefit of the doubt because maybe it's too consistent. Like, is there a reason why, or is there, or whatever it is? It's like, okay, so either she's like doing it on purpose. No, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
Or I just need to make a suggestion on how I like something done and hopefully she'll react to the right, and yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that's what happens is people sort of assume an intention or they don't give each other the benefit of the doubt. And I'm like, people don't have time to go around doing things on purpose to hurt you. I mean, maybe there are people like that, but I feel like that's on them. It's not on me. They're very few and far between, like how I get it all done. But I really think it is just, like when I want to go to a concert, like I have a concert this Thursday, I have another concert on Monday. I have another concert coming up in March. I mean, it's just sort of like, okay, kids, Manu, see you later. I'll be home at 11.
Well, and maybe that's another piece of this is that sometimes people lose their identity
Mm-hmm.
into the marriage, into the
Right.
children, into the work,
Mm-hmm.
they don't maintain this healthy sense of self.
Right.
This is who I am, these are the things that I like to
Mm-hmm.
do, this is what I'm about, and they kind of get lost.
And I think this is another aspect of that. It's none of my business. For example,
Right.
Manu does not enjoy going to concerts.
Right, and that's okay.
And that's okay because it's none of my business that he doesn't like going to concerts. And I can't sit there and abuse him for it
Right.
or get mad at him. Why don't you ever come to because I don't like him. I mean,
Right.
but he also can't abuse me for going to them. Now, of course, I always check to make sure there's nothing happening with the family, because our priorities are our priorities.
Absolutely.
So I still always check with him, like, hey, is it okay that I go out on a Thursday? There's no gymnastics happening. There's no soccer happening. It's sort of a free night, and I'll make sure, I love cooking, so I don't mind that dinner, like I'm responsible for dinner. It's like, okay, I'll make sure I have dinner ready. And so once I've checked with him, there's no abuse of why are you going out again and you come back late. I mean, there's none of that because it's none of his business in a sense.
Right, you have to have things you enjoy.
Right. And it's okay that I enjoy it and he doesn't. That's not, But I think a lot of times couples sort of get into that,
We have to do everything together. We have to be the same.
Mm-hmm. Or it means something if someone is doing something on a consistent basis that you don't like to do. It means something that you're always going to concerts. It means something, and it just doesn't really mean anything.
It means I like going to concerts.
It means I like going to concerts and you don't, and that's fine, So I think that a lot of times when people get married, they sort of have this idea that marriage means like you have to do everything together, and if it doesn't, maybe it means you're growing apart or something. But I've decided that that's not true.
I think there has to be a little bit of distance.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something to be attracted to.
Yeah.
If we're both the same, if we're both exactly alike,
Mm-hmm.
then what is the attraction there?
Right.
I don't know, this like desire to compromise. If there's no compromise there, it's just like
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's kind of milquetoast.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
These are all good things. Such good things.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right, I'll
Neat.
shut it off.
Yeah.